that in inflation adjusted for dollars, not nominal dollars, funding for the National Institute of Health this year will still be roughly $7 billion less than what it received in 2004. That's point number one. Point number two, and I would yield briefly to my friend from Missouri. Do I hear you saying that you, in fact, are supportive of A, reimportation, and B, having the federal government, Medicare, negotiate prescription drug prices with the pharmaceutical industry? That's what I thought I heard you say. I would yield to my friend.
Well, in terms of the money, I thank my friend for yielding. In terms of the money available for research, we have taken that 22% of buying power and changed it to about 15%. If we would have dealt with our bill this year, we would have changed it from 15 to about 7 or 8. And we need to get back to where we were 12 years ago and then not stop in real buying power. I want to do that. And I think what I said about the overall discussion of reimportation and other things was, I was just delighted to hear my friend from Vermont so supportive of what the next president's program is. And I
am very supportive of it. He's dead right.
And he will.
But I was wondering if my friend, when he said we are going to get to it next year, what does that mean? Does that mean you will be pushing the ability of Americans and pharmacists and distributors to be able to benefit from unfettered free trade and buy low-cost medicine, same exact drugs as sold in America from Canada and the UK? And will you also, as Mr. Trump made the point, allow Medicare to negotiate for lower prices? Well, that's something we can expect our Republican friends to support the president-elect on.
If my friend would yield, I would just say that we have passed this bill in the Congress, that bill several times over the last few years. On each occasion, often with Democrat administrations, the only obstacle had been for the administration to certify that reimportation could be safely done.
Exactly right.
And none of them have ever been willing to do that.
My friend is exactly right. Neither Republican or Democratic administration will have the guts to stand up to the pharmaceutical industry. So that today, if you have a salad, it is likely you're going to get your salad, your tomatoes, your lettuce from Mexico or some other country in very poorly inspected farms. That's no problem. But somehow or another, we are led to believe that it is impossible to bring in brand-named medicine from Canada or the United Kingdom or France. Just cannot be done. It is beyond belief that anybody with a straight face believes that that is true. Clearly, this is what the pharmaceutical industry wants us to believe, but I would hope that my friend from Missouri will not accept what the pharmaceutical industry tells us and understands that the next Secretary of HHS should certify with proper procedures that we can reimport medicine. I would yield to my friend.
Well, I would thank my friend for yielding, and I would just say that if the Secretary of HHS can certify that, that's a good thing, and I voted for that in the past. But I know what a tomato looks like. Farm boy that I am, I know what a tomato looks like. I don't know what's inside a capsule, and that's always been the obstacle that the people we have asked to look at this and certify the safety. Now, if people can figure out how to do that, so you know what's inside that pill, the worst thing you can do health-wise is believe you're taking a pill that isn't the pill you believe you're taking.
Yeah, I know what a tomato looks like too, but you don't know what kind of pesticides or how that tomato was grown. The idea that we cannot get a product from Pfizer or the other major drug companies across the border from Canada safely really doesn't pass the laugh test, frankly. This is one of the things the pharmaceutical industry has been pushing for years. So we have unfettered free trade for fish, for vegetables, for meat from all over the world. But from Canada or the UK or France, somehow we cannot safely bring medicine into this country at a fraction of the price that our pharmacists are now paying. Frankly, I would say to the senator from Missouri, does not really pass the laugh test. And I would hope that we can work there. Clearly, we want the medicine coming in to be safe. There's no debate about that. But I think we can do that. And I would look forward to working with you. I would yield.
If I could just say, I think the one thing we will accomplish before this week is out is passing this bill, but I hope this bill doesn't become something that we continue to refer back and say we've already done that. This bill is a step in the right direction, but in healthcare research, it does not get us where I'd like to be or where we were 12 years ago. We need the kind of research dollars that encourage young researchers to stay in the research business, the kind of research dollars that encourage us to find solutions, the kind of research dollars that ensure that every family that could avoid a crisis or be able to deal with it in a better way is able to do that. And so I look forward to the bill without this being passed as we finish the week. And
Well, I agree with the last statement that the senator from Missouri made. But let me give you, Mr. President, another reason why I am opposed to this bill. Incredibly, this legislation makes it easier for prescription drug companies to get away with fraud. And fraud is something that the major drug companies have been perpetuating on the American people for a number of years. It is not widely known, but it should be known, that since 1991, drug companies have paid over $35 billion in fines or reached settlements for fraud and misconduct. $35 billion. But instead of cracking down on pharmaceutical company fraud, this bill actually legalizes the fraudulent behavior of some of the big drug companies. Specifically, under this bill, pharmaceutical companies would be allowed to promote unapproved uses of drugs to insurance companies, a practice which is currently illegal. Mr. President, why would we allow the pharmaceutical industry the opportunity to market drugs to insurance companies for uses that haven't been approved by the FDA? This is a major, major problem. Let me give you a few examples. In 2013, the Justice Department ordered Johnson & Johnson, one of the major pharmaceutical companies in the country, to pay $2.2 billion in fines for, quote, recklessly promoting drugs for uses that have not been proven to be safe and effective, end of quote. According to the U.S. attorney handling the case, Johnson & Johnson's, quote, promotion of Risperdal, I hope I'm pronouncing it correct, Risperdal for unapproved uses threatened the most vulnerable populations of our society, children, the elderly, and those with developmental disabilities, end of quote. Congress rightfully determined that this is unacceptable and made it illegal. But under this bill, it could become legal. That is wrong. In 2010, AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals paid $520 million to resolve allegations that it illegally marketed the antipsychotic drug Seroquel for uses not approved as safe and effective by the FDA. In 2009, Eli Lilly was fined over $1.4 billion for its off-label promotion of another antipsychotic drug known as Cybrexa. According to federal investigators, Eli Lilly's illegal activity increased patients' costs, threatened their safety, and negatively affected the delivery of health care services to over 9 million military members, retirees, and their families who rely on TRICARE, end of quote. Mr. President, we need to make it harder for the pharmaceutical industry to commit fraud. But instead, this bill allows the pharmaceutical industry to, in fact, commit even more fraud. That is unacceptable. Third, Mr. President, let's be clear, this bill would cut Medicare and Medicaid by $1 billion. Mr. President, millions of senior citizens are in desperate need of Medicare and Medicaid. Today, thanks to Medicare, 48 million seniors and 9 million people with disabilities have health insurance coverage through Medicare, and over 73 million Americans are enrolled in Medicaid. The last thing we should be doing today is cutting Medicare and Medicaid. We need to make health care more affordable to senior citizens, the disabled, and low-income families with children, not more expensive. Finally, this bill, and this is quite significant, cuts $3.5 billion from the Affordable Care Act's Prevention Fund to prevent Alzheimer's, diabetes, suicide, heart disease, and lead poisoning. Instead of cutting Medicare and Medicaid, instead of cutting funds for health care programs, we should be demanding that the wealthiest people in this country and the largest corporations start paying their fair share of taxes. We should not be cutting life and death programs for the most vulnerable people in this country. So I say to my colleagues, if you want to lower the outrageous cost of prescription drugs, vote against this bill. If you're opposed to legalizing pharmaceutical fraud that can endanger the lives of many Americans, please vote against this bill. If you are opposed to cutting Medicare and Medicaid, vote against this bill. If you want to prevent cuts to programs that would prevent Alzheimer's disease and many, many other diseases, vote against this bill. It is time to stand up to the pharmaceutical industry and stand with the American people who are tired of being ripped off by this extremely greedy industry. Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Tennessee.
Mr. President, I come to the floor today to speak about the fires in Tennessee, but I would observe beforehand that by tomorrow we'll be voting on 21st century cures in the mental health bill. I have a little different view of it than the senator from Vermont. For example, using the money in the prevention fund, which was a part of the Affordable Care Act, pretty good use of it, I would say, is to support the President's Precision Medicine Initiative and to support the Vice President's Cancer Moonshot and to support the Brain Initiative at the National Institutes of Health. That's what we do in the bill. 1.4 for precision medicine, 1.8 billion for Cancer Moonshot, 1.5 billion for the Brain Initiative. We're interested in reducing grief and reducing spending in this country, accelerating the arrival of medicines that will identify Alzheimer's before its symptoms and other medicines that will retard the progression of Alzheimer's would be a magnificent thing to do. It would be a miracle for many families. And it's not just a miracle, it's something that Dr. Francis Collins, the renowned scientist who's head of the National Institutes of Health, the National Institutes of Hope is what he calls it, predicts will happen in the next 10 years, along with a vaccine for Zika, along with a vaccine for HIV/AIDS, along with a vaccine for universal flu, which killed 30,000 people last year, along with advances in regenerative medicine, which would put a physician like our former majority leader, Bill Frist, Dr. Bill Frist of Nashville, out of business. Bill Frist was at one time a heart transplant surgeon. He transplanted more hearts than anybody in the world, I think, or nearly anybody. But Dr. Collins believes that with advances in using our own adult cells, we will restore hearts. We won't have to transplant them. We may be able to restore eyesight. These are the kind of miracles that this legislation will encourage that could affect virtually every American family. And the other part of the legislation, equally important to the money, is that it would make reforms in the Food and Drug Administration and in the National Institutes of Health that will move those treatments and cures through the regulatory and investment process more rapidly, at lower cost, into the medicine cabinets, into the doctor's office, where they can help virtually every family in this country. That's why 85 senators yesterday voted to end debate on this bill, and I suspect more will vote tomorrow to send it to the president. That's why the House of Representatives, 392 of them, voted for this bill. Only 6 Democratic members of the House of Representatives voted against it. They're not persuaded there's some evil force in there. They like what they see. And not only them, the President of the United States says this is an opportunity we just can't miss. And the Vice President of the United States, talking about his Cancer Moonshot, says this is a big and important step forward. And the Republican Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, turned a couple of somersaults figuring out a way to do the funding on this because it's an important part of his own agenda for our nation's health care future. And I've heard the majority leader of the Senate, Senator McConnell, say in private meetings and in public that this is the most important piece of legislation we'll pass this year. Add to it the mental health legislation that Senator Cassidy and Senator Murphy and Senator Cornyn worked so hard on over here. Add that to it, and you get something that we can be very proud of, which is why it received such a big vote yesterday. So I want the American people to know that's what we're doing. I think that's what they want us to do. Now, we could do something in a partisan way, we could do something by executive order, or we can take 2 years, as we literally did in this bill, 2 years, multiple hearings, multiple consultations, many differences of opinion, all of them resolved, though, in a bipartisan way, and produce a lasting result. It won't be like Obamacare, where the next day, one party's trying to repeal it, the next party's defending it. It won't be like some other partisan legislation. This will last. Nobody's going to be trying to repeal it because almost everybody voted for it. And the money will come just as the legislation says year after year. So I'm proud of the Senate, and I'm happy for the American people, and I look forward to tomorrow. Now, on a more somber note, a week ago last Wednesday on a mountaintop called the Chimney Tops in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, someone spotted a fire and called the National Park Service about 5:20 in the afternoon. I've been up Chimney Tops many times, more times when I was younger than when I've been older. But it's a peak with rocks at the top. We're not like the West, where they have a lot of rocky mountains. We don't have many of those. We have 83 average inches of rainfall a year, unlike Southern California or Phoenix, places like that where they get only a few inches a year. So we have almost rainforests. And when the fall comes, lots of leaves on the ground. But the fire started up on the chimney tops. And I can tell you that there wouldn't have been anyone within 100 miles who would have imagined that somehow the next Monday, wind would have swept that fire into Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and burned half of it down, killing 14 people, injuring another 134, causing an evacuation of the town of 14,000 people, and wrecking lives, wrecking homes. There's been some people wonder a little bit, well, how could this have happened? Look, we've had fires all over East Tennessee this year. We're not used to that. It's because we've had a drought for a long time. I asked consent to put in the record following my remarks an article by Bob Hodge about Greg Ward of Sevier County. This is the county where Gatlinburg is. Greg Ward spent his 53 years roaming around the woods and waters of Sevier County, according to Bob Hodge, the writer in the Knoxville News Sentinel. And the long and short of it is, those who know the woods and the waters in East Tennessee know that this drought has been with us for a while. Trout stocking programs wouldn't work because the water was so low that it wouldn't handle the trout, and it was too warm for them to survive. The creeks were flowing in some places at 10% of normal. We'd maybe seen that once before in anyone's memory back in the 1970s. But for the last 3 months, there's been little rain, and according to Bob Hodge's article, we've had a drought since 2015. I ask consent to put this in the record following my remarks.
Without objection.
On Friday, Governor Haslam of Tennessee, Senator Corker, and I went to Gatlinburg. And the only thing I could think of to say to the assembled people there were two things. One was, your character is measured not so much by how you handle things when things are going well, but how you handle adversity. And if that's the measure of character, the character of the people of Gatlinburg and Sevier County is through the roof. Because they're not complaining. The mayor of Gatlinburg, Mike Werner, had his home burned down in 15 minutes. He was there at the press conference worried about other people, not himself. Cindy Ogle, the city manager for a long time of Gatlinburg, had her home burned down. She was there, not complaining, worrying about the other people of Gatlinburg and Sevier County. Mike Warner's business was also burned down. He's staying in an apartment of a friend nearby. That's happening, that story is over and over and over again in Sevier County. There have been extraordinary gestures by people to help. One point shortly after the fire started, there were 140 fire trucks from all over East Tennessee. There were 400 volunteers. The fires just kept going and going because this wind came up on Monday night after the fire was started up 10 miles away on the top of this rocky mountain, and a 90-mile-an-hour wind blew the wind somehow all the way into Gatlinburg. And the wind knocked down transformers. It started all these other little fires, and people were racing for their lives. I mentioned on the floor there were stories of firefighters having to get back in their trucks because to get away from the bears that were running toward them, escaping the fire, of people driving through fire to escape, of windshield wipers melting as they did that. Terrifying experience. In the West, they may be used to this. Nobody ever gets used to it, I guess. But we don't see that when we're from, with 83 inches of rain typically in a year. So I salute the people of Sevier County and Gatlinburg for their courage and their character and their compassion to one another. I know it's going to take a long time for many to get back on their feet. We're doing what we can to help. I salute the governor of Tennessee. He was there the next day. So were many of his agencies working seamlessly together. We went back there with him, as I said, last Friday. We've arranged through the state for federal assistance, which will pay for 75% of the cost of fighting the fires. Then that same day, we went on down to some other counties in Tennessee which had experienced a tornado at about the same time. We went into McMinn County. No one was killed there, but several were hurt. We went to Polk County, where we talked with a lady named Mrs. Stoker, who wasn't hurt, but in the trailer next to where she lived, the trailer had been blown across the road, and her daughter and the daughter's husband had been killed. We talked to her for a while, and the governor and Senator Corker and I were very impressed with her, doubted that we would have the strength she does. She said to us, as we left, she says, "You fellows go on back up there and do your job, and we'll take care of it here." I'm sure she will, but I'm awfully impressed with Mrs. Stoker. So I told the people of Sevier County that many senators had said something to me about the fire. Senator Feinstein called, for example, because of her experience in California. I'm here only to say those two things, that the people of Sevier County and Gatlinburg and of the area where Polk County is and McMinn County is, if their character is measured by how they handle adversity, their character is over the top. And secondly, to thank all of those who have tried to help. One last example, in the McMinn County area, a young woman had a baby during the tornado. Her home was damaged. She went to the hospital. When she came back the next day, the neighbors had found another home for her. They had clean sheets and everything that she needed. So they're wonderful stories of a terrifying set of incidents. I wanted to come to the floor and say that we're proud of the people of Eastern Tennessee. I thank the President. I yield the floor.